In the heart of the Persian Empire, a young Jewish woman named Esther carries a secret, an identity that could change the fate of an entire nation. Raised by her cousin Mordecai, Esther grew up simply, never imagining the grand destiny awaiting her. But then, King Xerxes makes an unexpected choice, and this young orphan is crowned queen. Yet the throne brings far more than luxury. It brings a mission. When the ruthless Haman launches a plan to exterminate the Jewish people, Esther finds herself torn between the duty to save her people and the risk of losing her own life. This is where the true battle begins, a battle of faith, courage, and sacrifice. With each glance and word, Esther challenges the impossible, proving that even the weakest can be used to accomplish the extraordinary. A story of risk, courage, and destiny. Today, let's uncover the true strength of Esther, the queen who faced an empire to save her people. And who knows, perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Esther 4 verse 14. It all began when King Xerxes, a powerful and vain ruler, decided to seek a new queen. His former wife, Vashti, had disobeyed a direct order, and in a moment of wounded pride, he dethroned her. But the void left by Vashti needed to be filled. So Xerxes summoned the most beautiful young women in the kingdom. Among them was Esther, a young Jewish woman raised by her uncle Mordecai. Esther wasn't just a pretty face. She possessed a quiet strength and unwavering faith. While many young women competed for the king's attention, Esther stood out in a unique way. Esther won favor in the eyes of everyone who saw her. When it was Esther's turn, daughter of Abihail, Mordecai's uncle, who had adopted her as his own daughter, to go to the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the harem, recommended, and Esther won the approval of everyone who saw her. Here we see something truly special. God's grace was upon her, evident in her demeanor, speech, and presence. Esther demonstrated humility and gentleness, qualities that charmed everyone around her, including the king himself. She shows us that true beauty goes beyond the outside. It comes from a heart filled with faith and trust. This verse reminds us that God grants us grace to be a light wherever we are. Esther didn't have to strive for attention. Her beauty and grace were a reflection of God's presence in her life. Like Esther, we too can carry this light that makes a difference wherever we go. But wait, the story doesn't stop there. Esther was settled in the palace, living her new role at court when her uncle Mordecai discovered a dark plot. One of the king's advisors, the ambitious and cruel Haman, who despised the Jews, devised a decree to exterminate the Jewish people. Haman, a man consumed by pride and arrogance, decided that anyone who refused to bow to him deserved to be eliminated. Mordecai, being a man of God, refused to bow to Haman, sparking the advisor's wrath. Haman then persuaded the king to sign a deadly decree. Imagine Mordecai's anguish upon discovering this plan. His people were in danger, and he knew Esther was their only hope, the only one who could intercede with the king. But for that, Esther would have to risk her own life. So he sent a message to the queen, alerting her to the situation and urging her to take action. This is where Esther had to decide, remain safe in the palace or risk everything to save her people. The tension was high and fear was intense, but Esther decided to act. Go, gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. I and my maids will fast as well. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Esther 4:16. This moment in the story is profoundly dramatic, where she has to make the biggest decision of her life. Act in faith, trusting in God, or be overcome by fear. Esther teaches us that to fill our purpose, we must place everything in God's hands, even when fear surrounds us. She knew that without divine intervention, the risk was great, but her faith and courage were stronger than any uncertainty. How many times do we face moments of decision where fear seems to paralyze us? Esther shows us that with faith, we can overcome our fears and trust that God is by our side. Esther fasted, prayed, and sought the strength to do what no one else could. Then, with her heart full of faith, she approached the king, even though this could cost her life. At that time, entering the king's presence uninvited was risky. Anyone who dared could be executed on the spot. And there she was, entering the throne room, heart racing, but with unshakable determination. The king, who still loved her, extended his golden scepter, signaling that Esther could speak. As the king sat on his royal throne, when he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor. Esther 5:1-2. Esther trusted that God was with her, and he honored her courage. This moment is a powerful example of how God responds in times of need. Esther had the boldness and faith in God to stand before the king for something far greater than herself. Often, we are called to face challenging moments for what we believe in, and God encourages us to act in faith. Like Esther, we can gain favor before authorities in difficult situations because God is the one who opens doors. Hold on. Esther was wise and didn't reveal everything immediately. She decided to act cautiously and invited the king and Haman to a banquet. This first meeting was just the beginning, as she organized another dinner where she finally revealed everything. In a series of strategic encounters, Esther told the king about Haman's plan and pleaded for her people's lives. At that moment, the king realized the betrayal and, outraged, ordered Haman to be punished, but were saved. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. Esther 4:14. Mordecai had told Esther. He knew that God had a greater plan and that somehow God's people would not be destroyed. This is the trust we must have. God takes care of his people and is always present, even in the darkest hours. Mordecai reminds us that God's purpose does not depend on a single path, but that he uses people and circumstances to fulfill his will. God prepared Esther for that moment. He also prepares us to face challenges and act in critical moments. Our lives and gifts can bring relief and peace to those around us when we choose to say yes to what he calls us to do. If today God is asking you to do something, don't let fear paralyze you. Trust in him and move forward with faith. And so, Esther not only saved her nation, but also left a lasting legacy of courage, faith, and wisdom. Her journey began unexpectedly in a world where women often had no voice or power. Esther was a young Jewish woman who, despite her humble origins, found herself as Queen of Persia. This life twist was not merely a coincidence, it was part of a divine plan that prepared her for a crucial role in her people's salvation. What we learn from this story is that, even in the face of the greatest challenges, we may be called to make a difference, even when our circumstances seem insignificant. Esther's story teaches us the importance of rising in times of crisis. When Mordecai, her cousin and mentor, warned her about Haman's wicked plan to exterminate the Jews, Esther faced a dilemma. She knew that appearing before the king uninvited could cost her life. Yet her courage and determination led her to make a bold decision. She didn't hesitate to risk everything for her people. This is a powerful lesson. Sometimes it takes courage to act in defense of what is right, even when the consequences may be severe. Esther's legacy challenges us to ask, what are we willing to risk for those we love and what we believe in? Esther's story also invites us to reflect on our purpose and mission. Each of us has a role to play, and Esther's story shows us not to underestimate our value or the impact we can have on others' lives. Who would have thought that a young woman from a simple background with no resources could become the bridge to save an entire people? This reality inspires us to recognize that God can use any of us, regardless of our social status or resources, to fulfill his purposes. Esther's story is a testimony of how God works through our lives, sometimes in ways we don't understand at first. She reminds us that God is the true author of our destiny, and that even in the most unexpected twists, he remains in control. Through Esther's courage, we see God's hand orchestrating events, from her selection as queen to her preparation to confront the king. This divine planning is a reminder that even when we face hardships, God is already working in our favor. He may be setting the stage for our victory, even when we can't see the way ahead. Today, we can look at Esther's life and find inspiration to face our own battles, knowing that with God by our side, nothing is impossible. Her courage is not only an example from the past, but a source of strength for those facing similar struggles today. If Esther could stand against the adversities of her time, we too can find it thinnings. And comment below, what inspires you most in Esther's story? Let's talk about how faith and courage can transform our lives. And remember, you also have a purpose.